All right, I'm dedicating this talk to Kip Hampton. Rest in peace, Ubu. And we're here to talk about To Serve Humans, a cookbook. Why are we here? For those of us in IT, the code we write changes people's lives, but we sometimes don't always think about that. A great example of this, I think, is the automation of jobs. Self-driving cars, cron jobs, and social media. It's nice when the bot is kind enough to let you know it's a bot. So let's look at a brief history of actually the Industrial Revolution. It started in textiles, basically. One of the first things was automated looms. It would automatically go back and forth on the loom, so a human didn't have to shuttle it back and forth, so the speeds could be faster. That was around 1733, and then in 1764, we got a spinning jenny to make the threads and yarn faster. Then automated, the steam power kicked in because most of this was like, water wheels. And then this is it's called a spinning frame to make, it's a spinning mule to make multiple kinds of thread at the same time of different varieties and strengths. And then, this is a modern power loom, but then the whole loom process, got automated too and put a bunch of people out of work, all from, in about 100 years, after we got especially after we got the power loom and the invention of the sewing machine in the 1830s, that drove the demand for prepared and industrialized cloth. So in a matter of years, we went from something like this to something like that. That's textiles. In the 1800s, 1870, about 70 to 80% of the people were involved in agriculture in some way. By 2008, that number dropped to about 2%. And we're still finding ways, this is kind of how it's done now, even kind of semi-automated, to find ways to even get the number of people involved in agriculture below even 2% number. So time marches on. And even where other parts of the Industrial Revolution, like steel. In the 1980s, it took about 10 person hours to make 1 ton of finished steel. By 2004, that number is down to 3 person hours per ton, and in some instances, some plants are getting 1 ton of finished steel. This is like from raw ore, coke, and everything to make new steel. But we're moving on to other things in terms of automation. In 1977 is when we first started doing any kind of research into autonomous vehicles. But I think the seminal moment in self-driving vehicles was in 2004 with the Grand Challenge. And DARPA said, hey, here's a bunch of money and try and make a self-driving car. And then 13 years later, we got autonomous vehicles kind of everywhere nowadays. And it's going to have a big impact, I think, because this is from a couple years ago, NPR did a thing about common jobs. And the most common job in the US by state is truck driver, or people involved in driving in some way. There's 1.7 million to 3.5 million people involved with that. These jobs make about $40,000 a year. And you don't need anything beyond a high school diploma to do this. And like I say, in 13 years, we've gone from it just being this really tough technological feat to having actual cars in city streets driving by themselves. So the pace of this change used to take a generation or two. 100 years to go from kind of hand looms to power looms and sewing machines. Now 13 years, time it goes from kindergarten to graduating high school, this change, we're just destroying jobs at this really fast rate. And as a friend said, we kind of used to be like in the waterfall version of unemployment. Now we're unemploying people in sprints in an iterative manner. And this is because we found ways to take the tools we've had and either use the tools to do the job or outright replacing jobs with better tools. Tools themselves, I don't think, have any kind of ethics or morals. They're kind of an amoral entity. And they kind of have a dual life. They're typically either creative or destructive in what they do. And I think it's the person that wields that tool that determines the ethics of the tool and what it's going to be used for creation or destruction. Even open source is a tool. The methods and processes of the open source method was applied to war. John Robb wrote this book about 10 years ago, basically described the insurgency of the 2003 Iraq War as the insurgent groups used open source methods and processes to exchange information and competing for people to fight against the U.S. and their allies. So, like I said, what determines how tools are used? It's the people using them and their decisions. This is Dr. Bensel from Notre Dame. She does research in decision-making, negotiations, and ethics. I was listening to a piece about why people commit fraud, and they referenced an experiment she did where one group was primed to think about, decision in terms of a business mindset, and another group an ethical mindset. Then she distracted them with a task, and then gave them the opportunity to do a separate task that they could cheat at. And when given the opportunity, people tended to cheat or lie or whatever. And this kind of self-validation, I think organizations are less than the sum of the ethics and morals of the individuals that make up the group. And so I think it's easy, and I guess the research kind of backs this up, it's easy to substitute the organization's ethics and morals instead of your own. And I'm not going to go describe what ethical behavior is, because as Sungo said, that's a squishy subject. And it could fill up even a semester-long course just on the intro of ethics. But because of IT, you can be part of something that takes your work and does something maybe bad with it. You're writing the software that analyzes the emissions of a vehicle, and someone asks you, "Hey, what state is the vehicle in?" and then takes your data and information and does bad things with it. But you had to be involved and know that what you're doing was maybe missing within emissions testing. And then there's the current, bad boy of maybe dubious behavior. Do things like, you delete the app from your phone, but it still sends private information back to the app owner without you knowing it. Or it does things like, I think you're a cop, so I'm not going to send any vehicles nearby you, especially in municipalities where it's not exactly legal to have something like Uber. They have lots of examples. And anytime this happens and it's okay with, like if you're working in the company, you see these things, you let it happen, especially if you're a leader of a company, it inures us to that behavior, and this becomes normal. But what do we do? How do we protect ourselves, or what do we do when we have this bad behavior? I think traditionally we use best practices, stuff built over time, like passwords. Way back in the day, we didn't have passwords, but that's mostly for non-network machines. Even on network devices, we would store the password in plain text. Eventually, we would, let's give it a cryptographic function. We'll store the encrypted password, and if we need to, we can send back the password to the individual. But now, for the most part, best practices revolve around like a hash function. Even I, who's storing the password, don't know what the password is. But what do we do when we're at, say, the cutting edge of whatever technology or development you're doing, and we have no best practice because it's so new? And we haven't built up the IT wisdom to deal with these things. I think we choose our own ethical code to look at, or at least kind of like we teach kids when they're in peer pressure or how to deal with drugs. We think about the situation, how would we react, kind of prepare yourself for that eventuality of when someone does something that you don't think is a good choice, IT-wise. Try and give examples of when we stand up to people about that. Some thought experiments to think about is what do we do when cars no longer break the law? I mean, autonomous vehicles normally will follow the law. What do we do when we make an AI to do predictive policing? What do we feed our personal, social, political, or culture biases into that system? Are we being sure that the system is fair, or we're making the right choices for that? Especially when the AI, like this is from Elysium, when the AI is the judge, jury, and maybe even lawyer for us. Sometimes harm is really accidental. I mean, just by the basis of, software itself is difficult sometimes to get right, even when we're intentional about it. Like I said, most of us don't think we're making Skynet. But we don't always really know what we're building leads to eventually. But we still have choices to make, and there is no fate but what we make. But how do we avoid that? Personally, another tactic. I think we need to examine ourselves, examine what we're doing, and try and maybe make something a more utopian solution, or a better solution. Something dystopian. Another example is from Herodotus and talking about the Persians. We don't maybe have to follow this literally in terms of getting drunk and considering that, but I think if we stop, change our frame of mind, like Ten Bensel said, if we're in a business mindset, maybe get in an ethical mindset, or just any other mindset, and consider what we're doing, that's a helpful thing too. Or if we say can't get out of our own mindset, find someone else. They're almost always people are going to have a different viewpoint than we are. Talk through the thought. It's kind of a diversity of opinion and thought. They're not going to necessarily suffer from the curse of knowledge about us knowing we know the specific problem we're trying to solve, or the solution we're proposing. Talking through that with someone else might allow them to spot the holes and weaknesses in the solution we're working on. And just to underscore that, we don't always know where our choices are going to lead us, but I think it doesn't hurt to spend some time contemplating what we're doing. Just because we've got to reflect, sometimes the choices we make, do we want to hopefully make something that's a place where we kind of work for the machine, so to speak, or try and get a place where the machines work for us, and the choices we make a place where we build upon our successes technologically and create better and better things. Thank you. Any questions?
And then you end up with something like I'm going to run certain iterations of this, and I'm going to imagine that
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I mean, what choices are you going to make as a worker?
People go, well, I didn't make that decision. But no one officially made the decision to make that decision
Right.
or the schedule. It just came out of some algorithm.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you worked at VW or Uber, it's like, okay, I'm going to quit over this. I mean, I don't think most people think about what am I willing to quit my job over. I mean, I don't think about it. I mean, but I work academia, so it's like I can shield myself supposedly. But I mean, yeah, yes. Right.
But I do, yes, but they could see they can get away with it because it's a crappy job. And
Well,
if
what?
you're working at, say, Google, like, I don't have that kind of schedule.
Right. Well, that's part of it is like, part of it is, like I said, the organizational ethics take over. It's like, that's the way we do it. I mean, we don't think about, like United, right? I mean, they had policies to, and they just fell in order. That's kind of the evolution of that. I mean, they didn't think about, because there wasn't a good culture, like the normalization part. The example you walk by is that becomes a standard. If you see someone, sexually harassing somebody and you just, that's okay. That becomes, especially if you're a leader type. If you walk by someone doing something that is nominally should be wrong, even in the company by policy, that becomes the policy. And like I said, we don't think about it because like a lot of the times, like in the Delta case, it's like there's algorithms that we got to get rid of these. We got to get these our employees on the plane, and we need to get X number of people off. And the algorithm said you can only offer $800, whatever it was, when the paper said I got to do this. It's kind of like Brazil. So yeah, I mean, this is a I wouldn't call it a quagmire. It's one of those squishy things. We don't think about, and I'm not supposed to say ethics, but ethics is the shorthand. We don't think about the consequences of our action. Even something like the poor guy that took down S3 last year. He thought it was just taking out a small pod. No, I took out the Eastern Data Center S3. Whoops. We don't know. I mean, even for those things, we sometimes don't think about it because we think we're doing one thing, and their actions accidentally otherwise do another. So.
Most organizations it's a very narrow view of ethical in the ways that
Right. It was also ethics. There's a squishy thing about ethics in terms of, okay, I'm a hacker for the NSA. I'm the good guy. But what if you're a hacker for China or Russia? I mean, you're standing up for your country's interests in the world. I mean, ethics there's not necessarily relativity, but could be just the way you look at the problem. I mean, I'm kind of a moral absolutist, but ethics, you can look at, Rashomon. I can look at the same situation and from two different perspectives, and we're both kind of right. It's, so yeah, I just want people to think about what they do from time to time. It's hard to be introspective.
This is a big discussion.
Right, I mean, because like the talking about the AI when we're feeding, it's like the drug use rates between African Americans and non-white Hispanics are roughly the same in terms of people using drugs. However, more African Americans are arrested for drug use. So when you make the algorithms, it's going to look more for African American communities or specific socioeconomic areas as opposed to, we got to think about that data. So, one last question before I get kicked off the stage. Comment? Yes. I don't know. I gave a version of this talk in October 2015, and I was like, it's like when I talk to this about friends, it's like I'm kind of defeatist. It's going to come and roll over us, and the people that own the machines are going to roll it. It's hard. You just try and be incrementalist, I guess. Try and do the right thing as best you can all the time. It's like I don't know. I mean, you just fight if you got it for you, even a little bit, right? I mean. The person that runs, even if they're slow, is doing more physically than me sitting on the couch. If you're doing something to be active, like Jay's talk, you don't have to be that active. Just start being a little bit more active in your community, be connected, trying to understand your area and try and make it a little bit better. So, Thank you.